Our theme this month is love. And my topic today is love goes the distance. Love goes the distance. We read a portion of the book, Your Deepest Intent, and we read from the letter of forgiveness. And it's attributed to Jesus on the cross. And one of the things that he said was, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Forgive them, for they know not what they do. And this word "do" in Greek means the final product. You hear me say sometimes that we use the same words for the verb and the noun. It's like there's the building, but then there's the process of building. But most of the time, we just engage the noun, the building, and we forget everything it took to get there. Or we forget that we can't have the noun without doing what it takes to get there. We want love without love. You know? Forget us when we know not what to do. And it's defined as an end product that sets something in motion that then takes on a life of its own. We're always doing things. There is a rippling effect of everything that we do. And we have no idea. None of us have any idea what we are setting into motion. So not only is it forgive us, for we know not what we do, but also bless us, because sometimes we know not what we do. We are also touching people's lives in ways that are just absolutely extraordinary by just the simplest of things. Love goes the distance. So I've been talking all month about love as the power in the universe that unifies. It is more than just an emotion. But I'm going to talk also of love as an emotion. But which one leads? Which one leads? Okay. It's the power that leads, not the emotion. If you wait till you feel like loving, baby, you're going to be waiting. Think about those conflicts that you have had in your life. It could be with your own self. It could be with a spouse or a child or a sibling or a parent. I mean, it could be almost anything. At some point, you had to choose love. You know how you're going to get there. You don't know if you were ever going to feel it. But at some point, you had to choose the unification. At some point, you had to choose to say, I am not going to stay in estrangement any longer. There's a cut here, there's a wound, and if I don't put a tourniquet on this thing right now called love, I'm going to bleed to death. This relationship is going to bleed to death. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's a choice. The warm and fuzzies, that comes later. Sometimes, maybe never. I hear Martin Luther King in my head now. He said, I'm so glad that Jesus didn't say to like your neighbor. Because it's really hard to like somebody bombing your house. That's really hard. Don't confuse love and like. You don't have to like it. But when you stop loving, you cut your own self off. When you stop loving, you cut you off. There's not love and hate. There's only degrees of love. The only way you can get to hate is to withdraw love. You can't end hate. You can only introduce love. It's like darkness and light. You can't get rid of darkness. You can't duke it out with darkness. You can't package it up. You can't shoot it out. We're busy shooting darkness. We got a whole military expenditure trying to blow up darkness, becoming more dark in it. The only way you get out of darkness is introduce light. That's it. The only way is darkness is the retraction. So every spiritual quality is always there, just like light. It's only a question of how much do we show. We're here to pump up the volume. We're here to increase the vibration. We are here to make the wattage higher. We're here to go from 50 watts to 500 watts, to 5,000 watts. And it doesn't matter where you are, just start where you are. See, love doesn't care. Love doesn't care how much you've shut down. Love does not care about the story. One of my favorite passages is Howard Thurman. No one ever wins a fight. He does these beautiful little poems and little, like 1-2-page essays. Love always heals. He says, nobody ever wins a fight. Nobody. And he starts off telling this story about how he was a little boy and he we got in this skirmish, and he made that boy eat dirt. And he came home, and he had to face his grandma. And he's like, but I won. He said, but look at you. And she said, one day you'll grow to find out no one ever wins a fight. And then he went on to say how he lived through World War I and how he lived through World War II. He was a classmate of King Sr. at Morehouse College. He was like an uncle to King Jr. And he's the one that's considered the father of the civil rights movement. He went to Gandhi and brought back the nonviolent techniques of Gandhi to the American civil rights movement. And I love what he said here. He said, perhaps the truest measure of a man's character is the weapon he uses in a fight. Think about that for a second. Perhaps the truest measurement of somebody's character is the weapon they use in a fight. He said, of all the weapons, love is the most deadly. But few will trust their lives to it. Why is love the most deadly weapon? Because love will destroy everything. It will destroy the conflict. It will destroy the story. It will bust through the walls. Whatever that righteousness is that you have in that conflict, if you put that in the hands of love, you don't have any control anymore. The good guy, bad guy, all that stuff starts to go away. And very few people will trust to that. The measure of our character. I remember having a discussion, this was years ago when I still lived in Los Angeles, and I said about relationships, and I said, people always say that first year is the hardest. And my colleague said, the last year is the hardest. The last year, okay? And that's when you find out the character. That's when you find out the character. What weapons they pick up in the last year. Listen to what I'm saying. What's your weapon? What's your weapon? Is it abandonment? Are you I'm going to take my bat and ball, go home? Is it fight? Is it flight? Is it freeze? Condemnation? Judgment? Hiding? Everybody's got their MO. I love the way the Spirit letters say that we're always using our defensive measures for offensive attacks. We attack with our defenses. We attack with our defenses. It's the most amazing thing. I've done conflict resolution stuff professionally for decades. Nobody ever throws the first punch. When you talk to people, every single person thinks that they are operating in self-defense. Even if it's preemptive. Even if they throw the first punch, they think that they're doing it before you to protect themselves. It's always self-defense. It's the most extraordinary thing. Obama just recently did an executive order. That's some bold stuff. It's called Executive Order 13691. It's an extension of something he did a few years ago. Look it up. He just signed it. It's about restricting the sale of assault weapons. And it is, woo! It is comprehensive. It is so comprehensive. And I love what he's saying about that. He says the issue now is so not about guns. He's saying it's about our consciousness. It is about our obsession with violence and the glorification of it and the condemnation of intellectualism and how we have to start to learn other ways to resolve conflict. That we're at this tipping point now, and we cannot keep going down that hole. Okay? And all I could see in that when I was reading it was this profound love. This profound love. Love of a nation. Love of humanity. Love of the best in humanity. And the way that I would describe it politically is how I describe a boundary. That a boundary is not a wall. You don't create the boundary for sense of separation. You create the boundary so that you can continue in relationship. And the way that this thing is written, it's written like that. Not to take away people's guns, not to take away their rights for guns, but to put some boundaries on this so that we could still continue with the right to have guns without destroying ourselves. Okay. Beware of the boundaries that you set in your life. Because if your boundary is not about ultimately healing and bringing it all together, it's a wall. It's a border. It's not a boundary. We don't need more borders. We had Clarence Jones here a couple of weeks or so ago, an advisor to King Jr. And he's actually one of the ghostwriters. He wrote the first part of the I Have a Dream speech, and he's written, many things. He was one of King's lawyers. And at that time, Muhammad Ali had just passed away. And I did one of my epic spoken word pieces, poems, and I dedicated it to Muhammad Ali. I said, one of the things, we know him as the greatest, as the great fighter, but to me, one of the greatest things about Ali was knowing when not to fight. The fact that he went to jail, the fact that he chose to be a conscientious objector rather than fight, and got stripped of all of his titles and came back and won them again. There was an episode of Touched by an Angel, and Della Reese plays this angel named Tess. And in this story, there's this young boy, he's about 10 or 11. It's a very small frame. And, appeared to be, scrawny, so to speak. And he was always getting bullied and picked on. So he decided he was going to learn how to box, and he was going to defend himself. And he was very angry. And they bring in Ali into this, a cameo appearance. And Tessa's speaking for him, because at the time he was still having, a hard time speaking. And he tells the boy that unless you are fighting out of love, it's just a fight. Unless you're fighting out of love, it's just a fight. See, love goes the distance. There's a famous passage in the first book of Corinthians in Scripture that's often recited at weddings about how love is patient and love is kind and love is forbearing and these kinds of things. Love goes the distance. See, I'm old enough now to really see that if you do not shut down and you keep loving, you get to the other side. It doesn't look like that in the moment, but I don't care how far gone it is. A couple of days ago, I was in Pleasant Valley State Prison. We're winding up this 4-month program that we do there called the Impact Program. And one of the sessions that I have just so happens to be on hate crimes. So interesting. It has gotten rescheduled about 4 times during these last months. So the guys immediately says, well, what about Orlando? Is that a hate crime? And I said, yes, it is. And I was describing to them about how we define a mass assault in the United States. If it's 4 people who've been attacked or more, it's considered mass. And how we, in the United States, have had more than 1 a day for the past couple of years. We have more mass shootings than days of the week and days of the year. We just don't hear about them all the time. It's kind of like the police brutality stuff. It's happening all the time. Just every now and then, a certain one makes it like up to the news, so to speak. And I was sharing this, and there's this exercise that we do where I do a racial cross-cultural dialogue. It's really risky, but it seems to always work. I remember the first time I did it, I told the prison outreach team, I said, I've never quite done it like this before. We're in prison, right? And I'm going to have them break off into racial groups and talk about issues they have with each other. And I told them, I said, this is either going to be a really good idea or a really, really bad one. So while we're in these groups, one guy pulls me over. Handsome guy. There's just something about this guy just like genuinely like anyway. And he says, the right to bear arms, that's the Second Amendment, isn't it? Yeah, it is. And he asked me that again, and he said, he says, I'm writing a paper now on the NRA, the National Rifle Association. He said, and after what you just said, I was talking a little bit about hate crimes, and this statistic that I'm just mentioning, he says, after I heard that, he said, I've changed my mind. I've shifted my position. And he says, and I'm going to redo my paper. I started to cry. That's in prison. That's in prison. Okay? And as he spoke to me, he was coming from this different place of love. Love never fails. Love goes the distance. There's been a lot of talk about this shooting in Orlando, of this gay club, the Pulse Club, and a lot of mourning, and particularly that it happened in Pride. And everybody's asking what happened and what's going on. And I realized when I got this one bit of news, it just went click, 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 click. Yes, it was a hate crime, but the killer hated himself. It was his own internalized homophobia. He had been going to that club for years, 3 years, twice a month, on the gay chat rooms. And when the news first came out about the shooting, the rants that his father did about gay people and how God would punish them. And I thought about my own life and my own struggles, and I had empathy. Not for killing a whole bunch of people, but I suddenly got it. The pain and the struggle and the religious implications and all of that. You know, we're painting it to be this big terrorist thing, but he didn't have any connections with ISIS. They haven't claimed it. A very disturbed person. And somebody asked me, how was I feeling about all of this? And like, as a gay person, was I like particularly hurt? It's like, I was first off pleased to say that I saw a love in this nation that I don't think I've seen before. I mean, genuine concern. And there wasn't a bunch of drama that these were gay people. And when the president ordered the flags to fly half-mast, and to see these flags around the nation flying half-mast for gay people during Pride, to see during the finals NBA game, them talking about it and seeing the rainbow hearts on the screen with hashtag Pray for Orlando. I knew we'd reached another tipping point about love going the distance. Because it was not that long ago, baby, when it would have been a rejoicing. And some people are still trying to go there. And what I told this person who asked me this question, I said, yes, it hurt. I said, but it hurt me just as much because guys like him are the ones that I have spent a lifetime trying to reach. Say, it's okay. It's okay to be you. It's okay to be authentic. It's like everybody goes through something. Everybody goes through their route. Okay? I chose overachieving. No, that was mine. I was going to be so good, and so in it, you couldn't get rid of me. That I was going to be so much part of the fiber of everything that to throw me out, you'd have to shoot your own self. That was my technique. Everybody did their own thing. I remember when I was president, a chair of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, and I was in D.C., and there was a bunch of us in the car, and every last one of us had been student body president. On more than one occasion, from all over the country, and one from Canada. Some people went drugs. Some people went a lot of things. But what I know is that love goes the distance. At one point in his life, that was my father. The hateful things his father was saying, that was my father. And that's what I grew up with. And I don't say this publicly, but that was hard. You know, the homosexuals are they're lying, they're cheating, they're murderers and all the rest of that. Now, mind you, this was another day. This was when it was still a felony. You're sick by the American Psychiatric Association. I mean, it was another day. And when I look back now, what I know is that if he really loved me, he had to fight that hard. Because if he really believed what he believed, it was his job to protect me. And he was doing what he thought was his job. And I can remember that moment, over my bed. I'm going to turn you straight if it's the last thing I do. He was a pharmacist and he wanted to go the medical route. But we finally compromised on psychotherapy. If I didn't have to do shock or take drugs. That was the compromise. So I did the psychiatric route. My father loves me. He loved me. And you know what he did? He studied. He was a man of science. He studied. And he studied. And unbeknownst to me, he never told me. He told my former partner. He started going to the Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gays. He started going to PFLAG. And my father came to me one day, and he apologized. And he said, I was wrong. He said, I now know it's not a choice. And I'm sorry. And he did a 180. I mean, a whole 180. So he was so loving and supportive and explaining to me how God not only loves me, but because of who I am, my ministry is going to be great. Because I'm going to reach people that other people couldn't reach because of who I am. Love goes the distance. I'm telling you, okay? But you can't give up. I'm not saying you can be up in everybody's face. But don't give up. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are at least two sides to every story, and then there's the truth. Keep loving. Keep loving. And if you feel like you can't love the ones that you're in conflict with, love somebody else. And I ain't talking about the codependent, go to find somebody who's going to co-sign. I'm talking about be of service love. Keep giving of yourself love. Keep stretching yourself love. Keep caring love. And if you will do that, I guarantee you, not only will your life transform, but something will happen. I'm getting flashbacks of just Friday before last, right here. On a panel discussion, we had the 10-year anniversary of the filming of God Engaged the movie. And I'm sitting right next to Reverend Darlene Bogle, who used to be an assistant pastor here, this church. And how she was one of the ones internalized homophobia who helped to start Exodus International, this big international thing, pray the gay away and the reparative therapies and all that. And she told everybody a few years ago they closed their doors. They shut their doors because they knew they were wrong. I call them the XX gays. But they finally figured out, but you know what I didn't know? When she first came here, she told me that she was a little hesitant because she wasn't sure we were Christian enough. What I didn't know? She's now part of the Inner Light community. She streams us. She's written books now. I've got chapters in her book that all of these ways, I knew that she had been an ally to me in certain situations with fundamentalists, but I had no idea. Because love goes the distance. And to hear her say that her own theology, her own Christianity, just like my mother, got her to the point of realizing that if you're going to love, you're going to love, and that means everybody. That means everybody. Today is Father's Day. I know we got issues. Everybody has issues. But we carry these issues around for generations. Are you with me? And at some point, it's our own internalized hatred about something or another. Everybody's just doing the best they can wherever they are. Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. Okay? We're here to know better, to do better. Let's move beyond the judgment. Let's move beyond the condemnation. Let us make the choice to raise the vibration of love. That when we see people who are hurt people. It's just a sign of their spiritual amnesia. Don't get lost with them. You don't know who you are, and then I'm going to forget who you are, and then we're both walking around in the darkness. And for me to forget who you are, I got to forget who I am. We are here for a radical inclusion. A radical inclusion. Fatherhood a lot of times has stood for discipline and the order, but not without the love. With the love that transcends it all. Up to a new level. We've got to redeem the yang masculine energy. It needs to be healed with love. And we can do it, but not by more judging of it. By loving. Because love goes the distance. Breathe.